Well, hello there, my dear.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. As you can see, my background, I am back home in Cleveland, Ohio, uh,
Yes.
ready to go. I know the last two episodes, I've been traveling. I was in Florida. And also, I think I came to stop and see you lovely people in South Carolina. What's going on, Blaine?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was a wonderful 2 weeks and really needed because the spooky season's coming up. We
Yes.
get going here in May, and we don't stop until the end of the year. Station and I, as Wardruna, will probably be in about 10 different states for events. And also, myself as a shaman with the Shaman and the Showman LLC, we have three major events. Of course, first up, what you just saw, the Connecticut Paracon on July 11th. And then August 8th and 9th in Hartford, Connecticut will be the Connecticut Witch and Culture Festival. This will be our third year. And then finally on November 14th, the Salem Horror Paracon will be coming up. I think that'll be our sixth or seventh year. This year, Connecticut, I think, is our sixth year. So going to be fantastic, as you see a lot of great guests. And we're excited about that, and we're excited for you guys all to come out and see us. First, www.paracon2ns.org. Get your tickets. If you're coming from out of state, there's a button to click the hotel where we're holding the event. You can get rooms there, so you can roll out of bed and be at the event. So we're ready for you.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. I'll get to come to. I'm planning on coming to Connecticut. Hopefully, I'll get to come to Salem. I don't know about some of the other stuff, but I'm always here supporting you. You know that.
Yeah, we're all over the place. I might be doing my show at some of those locations, but depending on the longer travel, like New Orleans and places like that, I probably could do it from my own house when the Cleveland Paracon comes around.
Oh yeah.
But we got a lot. We have the Hollow in New Jersey. We have the Underworld Culture Con in Scranton, PA. So there's tons of them. A lot of stuff at Haunted Hillview Manor. We're going to be at all their events, especially a big one coming up in June. Go on their website, www.hauntedhillviewmanor.com. We're going to be joining Johnny Zaffis for a night with John Zaffis. There's a lot of things going on. HillCon, there are psychic fairs, all kinds of stuff going on there. We'll be part of. There'll be one evening, I think, the psychic fair after. You'll get to go on a ghost hunt with Wardruna. So
Nice.
We're going to be there and have some fun because we always like to have fun on our adventures. So
Absolutely.
We'll some lives. Yeah.
Loved having you guys down here in the South. That was awesome.
Yeah, I know. We loved all the history that you guys showed us. A lot of the pictures people saw. It's just great spending time with you guys and all that instead of like being on camera with you. It's just that energy of being around family and stuff.
It is. It renews you. It does for the season. It does.
It does. But one thing I want to cover from last week, just to follow up, I did have some questions after the show. One of them was about multiple personality disorders. The reason why I didn't really cover it last week, specifically because they're still looking at stuff on that diagnosis type of thing. Really, they've kind of gotten away from it because it's so rare. Got a better chance of seeing a real demon in the paranormal world. But the reason why it's so rare is they're starting to find out that if you really look at it, a lot of people with trauma, when they have several different situations at a young age of trauma, it's almost like they go back to that point. All right. And they manifest it with something they could disassociate with. So let's say, God forbid, you were sexually assaulted when you were younger. Okay. Some people, when they get older, if something triggers that, what will happen is you might go to that time, or you might manifest as that thing where some women, where that happens and they're triggered, they might become more sexually promiscuous. They might like act more sexual and all that to kind of, or sometimes if one of the people has a situation that happened when they were very young, they might go back to like a childlike state. Right. So they're going to that, or they're manifesting that trauma has that thing, like more sexually promiscuous because of a sexual assault. So a lot of times when you have so many different things happen, even to the point where if you witness death, you become a little more morbid all of a sudden. You become more talking about death more, where you never really did before, because that's your disassociation to handle it in your mind. So really, that's usually what occurs. You're changing for that moment. So while you're in that disassociation because of that trigger of that trauma, that's really what's going on. So it's very rare that it is an actual full-blown multiple personality disorder. Really in the serial killer world, it has really been distinguished really too much. There's been talk of it, but somebody could disassociate at a moment and just kill somebody, but not in a serial killer way, I don't think. Maybe at a moment of they disassociate because they saw a crime when they were younger and they disassociate to commit the crime also.
Right.
That's a possibility, but there's nothing foolproof. Anything in the mind isn't really foolproof, just like our paranormal world. What's going on, Danny? It's just like our mind. We don't know what it does half the time. We only use about 15-20% of it. So who knows what the other stuff does? That's why psychology and uncovering all this stuff is so big.
Right.
But tonight's episode is a big one. You and I know, both of you and I know, because my first introduction to a crime scene was both of us. We worked as medics.
Yes.
In the ambulance, and you walk into a lot of this stuff, whether you walk in willy-nilly and don't know it's a crime scene because our dispatcher didn't give us enough information, or we get there and the police are there and you have to sign certain things before you go in, or they let you in. So there's a lot that gets behind it. So having that experience and then getting into the point where I started working in the Department of Corrections in Florida, and then learning all this stuff I'm teaching you guys tonight, just the way to look at a scene, because a lot of times the crime scene is a jail cell or anything that we worked with. But I'm going to go into pretty much the whole parameter of it, your giant scenes of almost a whole state or a corridor. There could be highways and all that, because sometimes serial killers are truck drivers. So your crime scene is their stops once you figure out what's going on. But we're going to get into all that. And again, appreciate all you guys watching tonight. Again, like I said, why I'm talking about all this stuff, I tend not to watch any comments, and after the show, I do acknowledge everybody. But also, if you have questions about anything, make sure you put them in all caps, and that way I'll answer them at the end. But also remember, a lot of the information that I give you, a lot of things that I talk about, don't take them to heart. If you're having an issue, psychologically, anything like that, please, please, please go to, your psychologist or anything. Talk to them. I'm not somebody here that's going to diagnose you, anything like that. I apologize for that. I'm no longer really in that field. So I want you guys to be safe, get the information, and have a good time with the show. And in that case, what we're going to do, Gwen? Let's zoom in, uncover the criminal mind. All right, guys. So again, I had the trip 2 weeks, Florida, South Carolina, all around. And, it dawned on me, I kind of think back on these types of things like we're talking about back when I first learned about, crime scenes and all that. And probably one of the biggest things is, when you get there, the main thing when you start out and witness something and you get there and it's a crime scene, you have to have scene preservation. It's just like, you got to make sure the scene's safe. You have to connect your initial perimeter is the most important part. We have to keep everything around it safe, any evidence that we might find. So the first priority is to prevent what we call Lockert's exchange, what that might be or what you guys be guessing it is. Instead of looking it up, I'll tell you the principle that every contact leaves a trace. So that's the thing, is anything in that perimeter could leave a trace of evidence. So we have to be mindful. We have to really look at the small details and all that. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we always establish what we call two perimeters. Now, the first perimeter, of course, is the hot zone. That's your immediate scene where everything is. And of course, the outer zone is the warm zone where a lot of the staging goes, where the tables are set up, where we might pull a truck in, or in case I worked in a prison, where we set off to the side just to make sure everything's clear and we keep the area clear. And that's probably the biggest point. You know, you want to establish a single path of entry, you know, so nobody's like walking in from here, back door, front door, through the window, whatever you're trying to approach. It's always a single path, and usually we have somebody set up there to make sure that nobody goes in any specific way, cordon everything off. We use it as a common approach path. It's to minimize, of course, foot traffic. The path would avoid areas where the perpetrator likely entered or exited. So we really don't want to set up our pathway where we might think the perpetrator came in or out. So we have to be mindful of that. So of course, there you're logging. The big thing is we have to log all these people, because when we get evidence, somebody comes in, touches something wrong, we have to know who was there, have their fingerprints and all that to make sure we could rule them out and to strictly find exactly if it's evidence or if it's just somebody that came into the scene and left their own trace evidence unwillingly. So we have to start a strict entry exit log. No one, regardless of rank, doesn't matter who you are, don't come in there, Mr. Tough Guy, I'm the FBI and all that. No, you can't do that, because it could ruin the chances of finding who the killer is, or in the case we're talking about, the actual serial killer. So you should enter without, they shouldn't enter without documented reason. And of course, we have somebody there to make sure we prevent all that. First things first is what you see in a lot of the movies is always somebody walking through and kind of notating down what they're seeing and trying to come up with, you know, that initial picture. So it's that preliminary survey, what we call the walkthrough, of course, very easy, generic. It's before any evidence is touched at all. We don't want to touch anything yet. It's the lead investigator. Usually one person is going to notate this, possibly two for a second view, but usually it's like to be one person to make sure, because you haven't touched any evidence yet or picked it up. We don't want anything to get ruined. So we're going to do a visual assessment. So we're looking for staging. Staging, of course, we hear in a lot of the movies and all that. They move the body to make it look like, you know, something that they want it to look like, or to you manipulate a body or an environment to shock the investigators or misdirect the investigation. Because a lot of times if you move the body, stage it, now we have to figure out where initially the action happened, so we could find more of, you know, the timeline and all. But you want to identify transient evidence. So this is to know anything that could disappear quickly. You know, case in point, sometimes you could get to a scene where somebody might have came in and left a foot mark, like a wet footprint. So we have to be aware that we have to quickly be able to identify that, because sometimes in a warm area that could dry up and we may not lose track of that, because sometimes we could get, you know, that print, a footprint off that, skin underneath and all that. Sometimes there's possibility. So, you know, such as the odors, the melting ice, or footprints in high traffic area again. So that's a big thing, especially when you're talking about Bigfoot. You know, you want to get those if they're in the ice, but that's besides the point. So to get off kilter on that one. But you have your macro to micro. So start with your overall layout of the room before focusing specific items. So again, with anything, it's the funneling. So we start out big and we start getting more and more in depth of where, you know, we're strictly going to start looking, so we could get a little bit more comprehensive. So now, comprehensive documentation. Documentation must be completed before any evidence is completed. What is that? That's when you see, once they do the walkthrough, you're going to have people come in and start photographing in the scene before anything is touched, because we want to see exactly where it is before that evidence is collected. So we're going to capture the scene. It's in 3 stages that you have to do. So you have your long range, the surroundings of the area. We have our mid range. So that's the relationship of the items near each other, and close up, with and without scale. So of course you'll see some of the scenes, there'll be a little measuring piece next to it showing like how, you know, big it is or anything like that in proximity. When you have it without, so you're getting really in depth, because we have to know measurements, because a lot of times math and physics is involved with a lot of this, to really know trajectory and how things were done, maybe how somebody's arm moved with a knife. So we're also going to do videography. So it's a slow, continuous walk, like I do the walkthrough. You have the camera with you, so you're actually seeing and can talk at the same time what you might be seeing. Basically, to play back later, of course, you want to make sure you see everything and it's able to recall what you saw, exactly how the scene looked. So you want to provide that spatial sense of the environment, and the photos, sometimes can miss those things. And with a video, you could pick up a lot more, because we can't sometimes take a picture of every, half an inch or anything. So this is going to help a lot more. Of course, there's going to be a lot of sketchers. So back in the day, I used to sketch everything out. So you want to create that bird's eye view. So it's almost like doing a blueprint and looking down, like we're looking down into the room, and we might check off where the body was, where we might have found this, might have found that. So it's that 3D, looking down and get that bird's eye view. We got to get precise measurements. So we're measuring out, we could put on there proximity, how many feet, how we mark the room down. So we're going to triangulate a lot of these things. So that triangulation of every piece of evidence is always helpful to look on that downward view. But nowadays we got a little bit better technology, of course. We have that LiDAR type of technology, the 3D laser scanning. So we could create a digital twin of the scene, allows us investigators to revisit the spatial relationship between the victim and the environment long after the scene is released. So other than videography, we could have a 3D laser scanning and all that. It really measures things out, proximity. So we could really look at that again. Now, one of the big things this is like a big part of it. I know a lot of us saw this. If anybody watched the serial killer show Dexter, he worked with blood splatter. That's another big thing in analysis, especially when you're looking through and doing all these things as we look at the blood, the physics, math calculations on the velocity of the blood drops, etc. Patterns to look for. We have that cast off, void patterns, especially if a body was moved, that void pattern could tell us where the body originally was. Expirated blood, of course, we want to know if it came from the nose or the mouth. There's a swipe or wipe thing that we talk about. That's how bloody object is moved across a clean surface is a swipe. A wipe happens when a clean object moves through the existing bloody surface. So those are very important things to look at. So it helps us, with the blood splatter along with the 3D thing, restructuring the scene with 2D and 3D applications mentioned before, especially if there's gunshots and all that. Same type of thing with the blood splatter, with the gunshots, where it went in. So we have to measure all that out. So we're really taking in the scene on those aspects, which is very important, because the next thing we're going to have to do is that systemic search pattern. So that's when we're really going to start looking exactly inch by inch what evidence that we're going to be able to collect. So we want to ensure that no micro evidence like hairs, fibers, DNA is missed. So use a formal search geometry. So a lot of you guys see this, especially when searching for missing people. We call it grid search. So it's ideal for the larger outdoor scenes, especially when we're looking for somebody, looking for evidence. The investigators or the searchers are going to move in a horizontal, then vertical line. So we're covering everything in that cordoned off area. So there's the grid search pattern. Of course, this is our gold standard for outdoor and large scale scenes. It involves overlapping passes to ensure that small trace evidence like a single fiber or a discarded cigarette butt isn't missed. A lot of times those cigarette butts are important because it tells you what brand they were smoking. Of course, there could be DNA evidence on that, especially, God forbid, if it's raining out, we're screwed. So that's a little harder time to collect stuff like that, but still take into what kind of cigarette they were smoking really puts together as we're trying to figure out who committed the crime. There's a spiral search also. That's starting from the body and moving outward in a widening circle. So we start there and we kind of widen ourselves out. All different kinds, just depending on what the scene really looks like. That's like the hardest part, is determining that without contaminating anything and how we're going to search. So there's the zone search, of course, that's breaking a room or an area into quadrants, A quadrant, B, C, D, and processing each area individually. So that's another important part. A lot of this stuff you'll see in movies and all that, but you probably never heard of it down to the nitty gritty like we're talking about tonight. So it's interesting. So when you do get to watch a movie and you see all this happening and all, so you really understand how they're breaking down the crime scene little by little, starting that searching and getting there. And now we're going to get to our evidence collection. So evidence collection, chain of custody, big thing. Evidence collection, chain of custody, very important, because we all know that chain of custody is how they screwed up on the O.J. Simpson situation. So that chain of custody was taken into consideration. So we got to be very careful of that and how we collect everything. So handling evidence requires extreme care to avoid cross-contamination. When we're collecting biological evidence, which of course is your blood or fluids, should be dried and stored in paper bags, never plastic, of course, because that could create a contamination, which traps the moisture and destroys, of course, DNA. So that's a big thing nowadays. Back in the day, before DNA, a little bit harder. We're more geared off fingerprints and stuff, but DNA nowadays has been a godsend for law enforcement. Also for scenes that happened years ago, they're starting to track down using DNA to find that people that are in prison shouldn't be there and let out, or people that should be in prison are still out. We come to find them, like D'Angelo, who was the Golden State Killer, who was a former law enforcement officer. Familiar DNA had caught up to him, and we were able to capture him with that type of DNA. So, of course, there's trace evidence. That's specialized vacuums that they have now, and lifting tape for fibers and hair. So those are something that's very hard to pick up. So there's types of things that they have now to be able to collect that evidence properly without contaminating it. Signature items, this is the big one, especially because we're talking about serial killers, serial cases. So the signature items, are your trophies, or specific arrangements are vital, how they arrange the body. These must be documented exactly as found to aid in behavioral profiling. Of course, when we're trying to track down, especially when it's similar from scene to scene, it's very important, especially the trophies. Or sometimes you don't even know what the trophy is. That's why it's important for investigators, and when they start interviewing people after, to really track down as we profile the victim too. What their favorite things were, anything like that. Track down why is their driver's license missing. That could be considered a trophy. What we mean to track down, credit cards, anything they might have kept sometimes at the scene. Again, warning, when I talk about some of this stuff could be disturbing for some people. Just put that warning up. But you could go in, there's bodies missing their head. Bundy used to keep his victims' heads and all, and has a trophy also, along with Polaroids. He was said that he kept these trophies. He says, when you work that hard to do what you do, you want to be able to remember it. So that tells you what kind of psychopath he was. But those are the signature items, anything you could think of that they keep for some reason. It could have a calming effect for them, or it helps them, that trauma that was their catalyst to create them doing these crimes. It puts them at able to calm down for a while. Of course, with serial killers, they calm down for a while, they kill again. So sometimes they use this stuff to hold them over until they kill again, which is unfortunate. But we always have to know what those items are. So it helps in the behavioral pattern to really figure out how these people are thinking, what those patterns are, what to look out for to prevent another crime scene like we're talking about. So there's advanced trace evidence recovery. Serial offenders often become more forensically aware. Of course, they watch too many shows and see what's going on. There's some serial killers that used to, like the co-ed killer, Ed Kemper, used to hang out at a bar with a whole bunch of other police officers that would talk about, what they were seeing. So he's learning and how to cover up his own tracks. Because when police officers get drunk, they don't know they're talking to somebody that's the actual serial killer they're looking for. Another was the Hillside Stranglers. They would do ride-alongs, and these police officers just talk about, they were looking out for these guys, and they're sitting in the police car with them. So a lot of craziness in how they would do those. So they become forensically aware. So over time, they make a recovery of microscopic evidence is vital. So there's alternative light sources. Of course, you'll see they have the light to see if there's blood has been there, dried up blood. We got our blue lights and all that. So it's to use different wavelengths of light to identify biological fluids. Of course, some of us use this when we go to hotels to make sure the bed isn't all messed up and all that. So it's a little skeevy. Looking for bone fragments or cleaned up blood stains are visible to the naked eye. So that's important. And again, we have our wet vacuum forensic sampling device that can recover DNA from porous surfaces like untreated wood or bricks, where traditionally swabbing might fail it, like traditionally. So a lot more technology is able to collect a lot of this evidence, especially DNA evidence, to the point where it's gotten so good that they're able to potentially put more victims to rest and solve things that have been years. Like technically, I still don't know if it's right, but you know that mitochondrial DNA that supposedly they looked at on Catherine Eddowes' dress for Jack the Ripper and figuring out who the killer might have been. Kaminsky, who was in a psychiatric institution, and that's when all the killing stopped, when he was taken in like that. So that was his mitochondrial DNA was on that dress. So that's why they think he was Jack the Ripper. So a lot of this stuff is being solved years later, some of these unsolvable ones. And hopefully the better it gets, maybe some of these other serial killers that have gone undetected, like the Zodiac, we might figure out who they were too. Got your behavioral evidence analysis. So this is where we really get into profiling the scene. The scene is a reflection of the offender's state of mind, which is important because we really want to know what they might have been thinking at the time and how they leave the scene, how much they take care of the scene, or how scattered it is. So staging detection is determined if the scene was staged to redirect the investigation. Of course, you have to be mindful of that. That's that organized, making a ritualistic murder look like a botched robbery. That ritualistic thing. If we go to the movie, the Seven with the Deadly Sins and all that with Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, we all know that he was setting everything up, staging it to look like each deadly sin. So that was part of that movie. But we have organized and disorganized classification. Organized reflects the methodical offender who brings their own tools and removes evidence. So like hiding your tracks, you're walking down, you don't want anybody to follow you, so you sweep your tracks and all. So almost a similar way in doing that. So our disorganized reflects a more of a sudden impulsive act, often leaving the weapon behind or a significant physical evidence behind, making it a little more likely that we might be able to catch up to that person. Again, organized, even down the road, a lot of times they're very hard to catch. We're usually waiting for them to make a mistake. Like with Bundy, he got pulled over for a traffic stop. Berkowitz, a parking ticket. So those are the things, how they catch up to them. It's just that one mistake that we have to be aware of, but we have to really take a look at everything to get to that point. So another big part, our victimology, our post-mortem analysis. So in serial cases, the victim is often chosen based on a specific ideal or availability factor. This is, again, where we have to profile our victims to figure out, similarities when we have to look at similar cases. In other words, to signify if this might be a serial killer case, the familiarity of how the person looks, how they're staged, there's certain things that were taken from the scene. If we have a similar scene and everybody seems to have their driver's license missing, that may be what they have for a trophy. So those are the things that we have to look at. There's the comfort zone assessment. So it's determining the geographic relationship between the dump site, the kill site, and the abduction site. Helps establish the offender's buffer zone, the distance they maintain from their own home or workplace. So they could be doing this after work, before work, at home. Those are the things we have to look at. Where they were abducted, of course, if they were abducted at the same place they were killed, the dump site. a lot of people always want to do something where they know and they're comfortable. So that's why we kind of have to know where it all occurred, if it's happening over and over in that square area. That's where we really get down to the nitty gritty of that zone, of course, comfort zone, knowing that the killer knows the area. So they, signify where they're going to keep doing that over and over again. And it helps us be able to track them down that way. There's the wound pattern analysis beyond the cause of death. Investigators look for overkill or specific post-mortem positioning. This distinguishes the MO, modus operandi, what is needed to commit the crime, from a signature, what the offender does to satisfy an emotional or psychological need. The case of the BTK killer, bind, torture, and kill. So a lot of the scenes, they were bound and looked like tortured by the looks of their bodies and all that. So those are really what the MO was for Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, that sadomasochism, sexual assault. But that's besides the point on that one. But the next we get into is our digital and technological canvassing. This is where a lot of the newer technology, of course, has helped trying to track down some of these serial killers. What they're doing now, is, of course, is your cell phone really, going off towers, really pings in on who was in the area, to the point where they could ping in on the tower of any cell phones that were in that area at that moment, to the point where they could go and canvass an area, let's say that little square area where like a few houses are, and you could rule out people that live in those houses. And this is, okay, why was this extra cell phone here at the time of the murder? Becomes a suspect of whoever owns that phone. So it's that cell tower dumps, capturing all the pings from a local tower at the estimated time of death to find anomalous devices present at multiple scenes. So if we see that at multiple scenes, then that could mean that's our guy or our lady, to be able to find out that phone and track them down. So there's also geofencing. It's identifying every mobile device that entered a specific perimeter during the window of the crime. Another way to look at it. So, but alternative perspectives, while forensic science focuses on physical, some investigators, like ourselves that we're learning, myself, also look into the geographic profiling. We want to map the scene's location relative to other incidents that happened to determine the offender's anchor point or hunting territory, which again, I talked about earlier. Some of these people, the happy face killer was a truck driver. So it's really hard to pinpoint in, but a lot of times when you go to a scene and a lot of the bodies are found by major highways. So that's something we want to look into. Of course, if you get multiple ones at different points of the highway, we start determining what truck companies work that perimeter back and forth. We can narrow it down, because sometimes, again, they want familiarity. So if they're on that major route all the time, sometimes we could track down people that deliver on that route and pinpoint in. And of course, with cell phones, again, we could pinpoint in on that truck route, the truck driving company, people that work for the truck company at the time of determining the body point of death. You could really pinpoint in now. So technology has really helped on being able to track these people down. And of course, next week, once we do track them down, next week I'll be talking about, once we do, it's going to be the chess match of matching wits with a killer, serial killer, how we question them to really pinpoint in. Because as we gather all this evidence, this is going to be our truths, especially if we get DNA, anything like that. We could pinpoint in on who we got, know that we have them, but to be sure, of course, we're going to take them in and question a little bit more to pinpoint in and have enough evidence to bring it to court. And a lot of this evidence we're gathering is to get those subpoenas to be able to pick up a lot of these people. The final part of it is the final survey and release. Of course, before we clear a scene, a final review is conducted to ensure no equipment was left behind. All evidence is accounted for. Once the scene is released, it is nearly impossible to regain its legal integrity for future warrants. So that's why we have all the videography, all those things, everything's pinpointed in. So we want to make sure we have all that. So the layout of a crime scene serves as a primary behavioral fingerprint, of course, for all law enforcement agencies. Investigators analyze these scenes to determine the killer's organized and disorganized nature, their level of forensic awareness, and potential signatures, of course. So our MOs, what their signature thing is. Like some movies, they leave a ace of spades at every crime scene, those different signatures, and also how we're determining that and how it pinpoints in. So I want to go into some of the big things because, of course, to give you all the boring details, but let's go into some of the famous crime scenes and how we all looked at those, law enforcement looked at those. So I got 3 of them for you. Of course, the first one is famous. This one goes out to my friends, the Radicals, who own one of the forks confiscated from Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. But the crime scene there, of course, the scene in apartment 213 was described by responding officers as the macabre gallery. Unlike many serial killers who dispose of evidence, Dahmer's residence was a static repository of his crimes. The layout, the scene was characterized by high levels of organization amidst biological chaos. Even though everything was organized, there, just everywhere was evidence, was categorized by state. So in the kitchen, law enforcement, of course, found human remains in the refrigerator and freezer, packaged and organized in a manner similar to commercial meat. Of course, the famous hashtag by my friend Blaine Rowan, when we talked about Dahmer before, back on our other podcast, of course, hashtag leg of Joe in the refrigerator. The living area was a blue plastic drum was used for chemical disposal, positioning as a centerpiece of the room. The chemicals that were in that blue is what he used to do was he tried to turn his victims into zombies. So a lot of that chemical was to strip stuff away to the bone, but also he would use acid and put holes into some of his victims' heads and put acid in there, hoping that he could make them zombies so they'd stay with them forever. So that's crazy part of it. But then of course, the bedroom, there was Polaroids of the victims were found in the bedside drawer, laid out as chronological trophy collection. Of course, if you saw the Monster TV show, they had the guy that played Jeffrey Dahmer say, I just want to take a few pictures and all that, a little creepy line. I don't know if he really said that in real life, but that really made the character even more creepy of the reality. So that was crazy on that part. So the investigative focus, the scene is the textbook example of the staging for self. So he staged his whole apartment for his own special needs and all that, where he had everything specifically for him to keep his weird, crazy thoughts at bay there for himself, whenever it was a sexual turn on. But the killer wasn't trying to hide the crime from the police. He was organizing it for his own, of course, psychological needs. So the next crime scene, the big one, we been a lot of movies about this guy, the John Wayne Gacy residence in Norwood Park, Illinois. The Gacy crime scene was largely invisible to the naked eye until investigators began a physical excavation of the structure, because of course when they went in they could smell stuff, couldn't really find it. But the layout of the primary crime scene was a crawl space beneath the house. In the crawl space, victims were buried in a sardine fashion, almost melding together. Even to this day, they're still trying to pick apart some of the people that were possibly down there. They were tightly packed and layered. Investigators had to map the scene using a grid system, and we talked about earlier, your A, B, C, D, carefully documenting the depth and orientation of each set of remains. So in the garage utility room, there were areas were identified as their primary kill zones, which when he would take these people in, have the parties with them, do the handcuff thing and all that. So they're featuring in that area where the restraints and evidence of physical struggles of his victims. The investigative focus, law enforcement focused on a geographical efficiency. Gacy used his own property, of course, as a disposal site, which required high confidence and belief that his public persona provided an invisibility cloak. He was very engaging in politics and all that. So, winning like awards and all that for stuff that he did for his community and giving people jobs. So a lot of people wouldn't think. So it took a while to find him because technically he, like we talked about last week, developed and pretty much had a psychopath type of personality that also what we call a communal narcissist, somebody that's out in public, could show, hey, he's a great guy, but behind the scenes is very abusive and wants everything about him behind the scenes. So it's something that we looked at with that. Finally, probably one of the biggest ones is very weird because Bundy was very calculating at first. And I think near the end there, he started to fall apart. That's why he was captured. But that's why we look at the scene. It was hard to piece it together with some of his stuff out in Washington. This is when he was in Tallahassee, Florida, the Ted Bundy Chi Omega house. The scene is a premier example of a disorganized, frenetic layout occurring during an organized killer's spiral, like we talked about, spiraling out of control. He was organized, so that made it harder to pinpoint in. But the layout of the scene spanned multiple rooms and a second floor of a sorority house. And the path of travel, investigators tracked a rapid linear movement through the hallway. The lack of forced entry suggested a blitz-style attack, which is similar to the other guy that killed the college students out in Idaho. That was very recent. So biological evidence, the layout was defined by a high volume of physical evidence. Bite marks, the bite marks are really what keyed in and figured out that it was Bundy because of the mold they took from him. The hair fiber left in the short window of time. Of course, the investigative focus, like we talked about, law enforcement utilized the bite mark analysis, blood spatter patterns to reconstruct sequence of events. The messiness of the layout indicated a loss of control, which eventually led to his capture. Early in there that he really started losing it, which was good that they captured him because who knows what he could have done beyond that point. But, in closing, let's just do a little summary. Of course, serial killers, it's more of that organized, disorganized scene. A lot of times with an organized scene, when we look at body placement, it's often hidden or posed. So a lot of times they might hide it. There's evidence there, no body, because without a body, or the case, they say you can't convict. So that's what serial killers that are organized are trying to do. They might hide it away. Like Bundy, some people revisit their crime scenes. So where they have the bodies hidden, they could go back to, or they pose them in a certain way that gives them sexual gratification or just to mess with law enforcement, like a game of cat and mouse. Their weaponry, they usually take from the scene. The evidence is usually very minimal evidence of cleanup. They might have tried to clean the scene. Of course, we have our special lights to see what they might have cleaned up. The state of the victim, where they restrained, controlled, so that controlling psychopath. Now, disorganized scene, we had our body placements usually left where the assault ended. The weaponry opportunities, something they might have found at the scene. They might not have really thought of what they wanted to use at that moment. Evidence, high fingerprints, DNA, common everywhere. In the state of the victim, looks chaotic, a sign of sudden struggle. So it wasn't really a planned out surprise type of look at it. But this is really what goes into it, and we put all this together, like I talked about, our history of profiling and law enforcement, how we look at things. Also, we looked at the types of serial killers, and then last week, the psychological reasoning behind some of these serial killers, and now how the evidence lays out, looking at a crime scene. And now from there, when we use all this stuff, put it together, see the patterns, and then we hope sometimes that we could pinpoint in, like we talked about cell towers, things are becoming easier and easier to pinpoint in. Of course, the 80s was the highest time of the most serial killers, but as technology comes out, it's making it harder and harder for them to commit more crimes than the 3 considered to be a serial killer. We're catching people a lot quicker now, I think. Are there serial killers still out there? Yeah, there's people out there currently right now taking a little different look at it because there's so much information out there. And some of these killers, especially organized, are looking at other ways to hide their crimes. So it's that cat and mouse, it's that challenge. And next week, we're going to be going into how we interview and interrogate a potential suspect, really with the psychology behind it. We're really going to go really far into it. Next week's going to be really exciting. I hope you guys enjoyed the last few weeks. We're leading into it, and we're learning more and more. We're getting to the point where we're going to start looking at individual serial killers, going to start having some guests on their views, specifically ones that are keyed in specifically on a certain serial killer, have studies behind them, get their opinions and all that. And of course, we want you guys involved too. Anybody that's watching, everything that you learned, how you look at it. Again, remember, we're doing this podcast to help you guys learn how to see things, how to avoid becoming a victim, or help, with our children growing up, how to recognize things, get people the right help. Of course, my healing group, Wardruna, a lot of things that we look at, especially with my background, just helping children, in specific situations. It's not all about, paranormal that we do. It's outside of that too, helping victimology and people that have gone through traumas and all that, to get them the right help, the right people. So keep that in mind. If anybody out there is in need, be sure to reach out. We'll get you the right help that you need, and to help kids go through some of this trauma, that way they don't develop at an older age into being one of these types of monsters, or become a victim themselves, to avoid all that stuff and to keep ourselves safe and all. And we'll probably do a show about keeping ourselves safe and how to protect ourselves, and we'll go into all that too. But from here, we'll bring Gwen back out, see if anybody has any questions, and that way we can answer them after a little bit longer tonight. So I usually like to get done in 45 minutes, so we have a few minutes to talk. But there's Gwen. Oh, there she is. How you doing?
I'm fine listening to you. I'll be real with you. Interesting. We, like you said, we both worked in emergency medicine, let's call it. And you were, yes, I loved it. I'm sitting here all in it.
Yeah.
He said Glenn, and I was like, oh, I need to click. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was really looking forward to this one, because this is probably one of the most important things. This is where everything starts getting put together. This is where we really determine, hey, we got a serial killer on our hands. How are we going to approach it? Now we have to really start profiling and getting other people involved with the specialty. People like myself, the forensic psychologist, and really looking at a scene and all the evidence. As you gather it, you look at it and you get the data, because just so you guys know, profiling is boring as shit. All right. The movies make it look like it's this fantastic thing. Now, remember, profiling is just a part of the job. What it is gathering enough information to put something together. So it's all data. So unless you like data and putting it together, we're putting together, we're making a model of who somebody might be by their behaviors, by what they leave behind, what we know potentially from past serial killers, of course, the BSU, doing the Mind Hunter and interviewing other serial killers. So we use serial killers from the past to be able to put together patterns of ones now, because a lot of these serial killers look at other ones that do the same thing as heroes, start copying them. Bundy helped the FBI track down Gary Ridgway. That's why in Silence of the Lambs, that's why they used that character to help the FBI track down. And specifically, Thomas Harris, the writer, used that scenario for the book. And of course, Ed Gein character being Buffalo Bill. So there was a lot of different history of reality making these movies. So when you do watch these movies, there is some reality behind it, all depending on the movie, because sometimes they get people maybe like myself or other people that have been doing this for a while to really look at the movie and say, hey, if you do it this way, it's going to be more realistic. Sometimes people go into willy-nilly, they read a book and think, hey, I got this down, and then it doesn't make the movie realistic. So you want to make it as realistic as possible.
You do. I'm going to start popping up where people said hello while you're talking.
Yeah.
Of course, we got Blaine, Asia, Raven, Danny, Samaya, Mr. Greg, Marla, me explaining to everybody. Greg again, Adam, of course. Marla has, I'm gonna go past it. Marla, if you want to read that,
okay.
Do all of the, you can read it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Testing sightings, keep records and samples of what they are testing. Yes, you have to. They keep them for a long amount of time, even after somebody's put in the jail. There is a time period that everything's held onto. I don't know what they're up to now, but there's stuff that cold cases, their stuff still in lockers and all that. I think a lot of times after, even if a crime is solved, nowadays with DNA, they may not have to keep it as long because it's a little more closer to 100% than it used to be. And it's good that they do hold on to that, because some people that were put in prison, we're finding out were wrongfully accused, and DNA is getting them out. So they do have to hold on to that stuff a long time. A lot of your towns have multiple buildings that are owned by law enforcement or forensics to store a lot of this stuff. So it isn't all stored at a police department, undisclosed locations where a lot of this stuff is stored, just in case.
Yep.
So, you know, you want to do right by people. I know sometimes everybody hates law enforcement, you know, lawyers, legalities and all that, you know, until they actually need them. Yeah, they hold on to this stuff just basically for your own rights. So if you're wrongfully accused and God forbid go to jail, at least, you know, sooner or later, hopefully science catches up and gets you out.
Yeah, it's true. Anybody got a question? I know we got people watching, and once again, the counter right there, it's never right. So don't go by that. And I know people that are listening too, because they like it. They really do, Tom. You're very informative. But anybody have a question? If you do, my question, I do have a question, because I've been on many crime scenes and stuff like that and I've had my boots taken and little pieces of my hair, which did not make me happy. And so I've had all that done. My gloves, I've had to leave my whole uniform and everything. And I hated that, but I knew what it was for, and it would be a little bit of an aggravation, but you know, stuff happens.
Well, it is, because, you know, as a medic, you go in, and if the scene hasn't been secured yet, because they don't realize it's a crime scene, you go in as a medic. If they've been shot or anything like that, they're bleeding.
Yeah, you have to
transfer goes onto your uniform, especially if, you know, there's residue that might get on your uniform from that wound, that residue tracking and all that. Some people don't realize that sometimes the bullets, you know, don't, you know, go in and out, and as you're moving the person around, some of the bullets get stuck in your uniform. You don't even know they're there. So,
I know somebody that actually, because they had to move the patient, because sometimes you have to move them to get them on a flat surface if they stop breathing or something, because it, you know, but one of the shells,
crime scene doesn't matter.
One of the shells casing went in their boot, the cuff of their boot, and when they took it off to give as evidence, there it was. So
and that's hard, because if they don't discover it right there, if you don't, you have to strip down, you know, if it becomes a crime scene. Because if you go home with that bullet casing, and that bullet casing could convict somebody, once you leave that scene, it's corrupted. It no longer could be considered in a court of law. So you have to keep it in that area. So that's a very important part, to make sure that if you're part of a crime scene, and you can't really leave. Sometimes
and you don't know if it's a crime scene. Sometimes, like we said, you don't know sometimes.
Well, exactly. Sometimes you're stuck there. Another rig has to come and take the person, if they're still viable, or the coroner to come and remove them after everything's cleared. But if there's still a viable patient, you know, and you're involved and they consider it a crime scene, you're stuck there. They have to look everything over on you. They release it to somebody else that's beyond the hot zone on that outer perimeter, what we call the staging area, and be able to take them, you know, after they've gone out that path to get there. So that's important too. So,
now, Marla has another question, if you can see that one. She was saying good for the answer, but she said ADA assistant threw some rape information away.
DA assistant threw some rape info away because he knew the rapist. How do they get justice for what happened? There's got to be proof behind it. You know, there's speculation. What did he throw out, or what was there? Right. You know, you throwing out evidence, there is that point where there is laws that if you get rid of something and they know you got rid of something, you could be brought up on charges, because that could set somebody free. You could convict the wrong person, especially when it comes to rape, as we talked about. You know, the BSU Behavioral Science Unit tracking on these serial killers really started from, there was a lot of serial rape and murders constituting the phrase serial killer coming about, and that was a big part of it. But yeah, even if you're the DA and all that, and you handle something like that and you get rid of it, you're under scrutiny too, and you potentially could be arrested, lose your law license and everything. So there's a lot that goes behind it. They don't screw around when it comes to this type of stuff, especially the science we have now, and the more provable things are. Nothing's ever guaranteed, but it's pretty much 100% with a lot of the DNA nowadays, especially the context and what we find forensically.
Greg, Thomas, Greg is saying he looks dapper. He did. I like the look. I do.
Yeah. It's my formal Irish hitman. Got my vest on and all that. I thought I'd look a little bit more, I have all my posters out to advertise. I thought I'd kind of look like I do on that, so it'd be good. So.
I like that. She's saying that the DA assistant got fired for doing it. I'm glad they got fired, but I truly hope they got prosecuted also. I really do.
They, when they get fired, like, you're not going to get away with it. They are going to be brought up on that because it's, aiding and abetting almost in a way, trying to keep somebody safe. And, it's a conflict, of course, if there's a scene and all that, and the person exclusively as a friend, you can't really represent them properly. It's the same thing, a husband and a wife, go to court, you can't, they can't bring you to testify against your husband or wife, depending on the circumstance, against them when you're still married, because of course, are you going to tell the truth? Probably not. You're going to protect your loved one. So that's why they're not going to bring them up on the stand. But even as a lawyer, if you exclusively know somebody, are you going to be able to represent them properly? That's why it really bothered me with the O.J. Simpson, because his initial lawyer was one of his best friends. So how are you going to do this properly? Yes, they brought in a team and all that, but that was like screwed up from day one.
True.
And I still go back on that one, was really messed up. A lot of the stuff was contaminated. Yes, he had a lot of great lawyers. That's what money could buy you sometimes, but really in the end, really, where did it get him? Got him really nowhere anyways. That, we all know, looking at a lot of that evidence, that he was guilty. But of course, the court of law said otherwise. But nowadays, those are the things that teach us to be more careful of what we're doing, instead of the willy-nilly. Because I know a lot of law enforcement, there's really good people, and with any job, there's not so good people. And going in, especially as detectives, some of them have this big ego. They nonchalantly pick stuff up, and the next thing you know, it takes a good lawyer to say, hey, I see the type of guy. They're profiling the police officers that pick up the evidence to get their person. Their job is to get the person that's on trial out of it. So you screw up, you got to be very careful, and you have to be mindful of everything that you do in these crime scenes, especially in a serial killer situation. How would you feel if you had some evidence there and you screwed it up, you didn't collect it properly, and a serial killer goes back out there and starts killing a few more people? That's on you. That's on you. That's your responsibility. It's stressful. That's your responsibility.
Yes, he does look like Peak. Yes. That's why I love that show.
I'm gonna
thank you.
Instead of my first name Thomas, I'm gonna be Tommy. So that's Tommy for tonight.
Tommy Gunn Patrick. There he is.
There you go. So,
gotta give
a
I know we're at an hour.
Yep.
Yeah. There you go. So do you know what you're doing next week? Can you tell the folks what to look for?
Well, next week I kind of hinted at it. Once we get all this evidence and once we get an arrest, then it becomes the chess match. We're going to be going over the psychology behind a proper interrogation. Not really the ones you see on TV. We're going to go really in depth of how we interview a potential murderer or a potential monster. But a lot of stuff we're going to talk about next week is also things that you could use in your daily life. How you talk to people, especially if you're a manager somewhere, how to properly talk with people that work with you. Because a lot of times it isn't like yelling at somebody and say, I know you did it and stuff like, no, it's more of a chess match. But it's also to the point where it's done professionally. And that way you could use it in everyday life, especially when your kids are messing up. as they get older, you want to find out what's going on, but without creating more trauma than there already is in the situation, to be able to coax information out. And we're going to be going over all that next week. So it's going to be one of those episodes. Make sure everybody tunes in, because we're really going to pull apart the mind, the chess match between myself or an interrogator and a monster. So that's going to be a fun one, and see what happens with that. So I hope you guys all tune in. Again, thank you guys all for watching. I'll go back and look at all the comments. And again, I love that you guys all watch. Appreciate you so very much. And, Marla, thank you very much for all the questions. And anybody, just remember, you guys, get involved. Make this immersive. Ask all the questions. Something that you've always had on your mind. Asking that question might help you in a situation. And I know there'll be an episode where Gwen and I will talk about, what happened to her. And,
Hey, and guys,
being on the show and being able to figure out what was going on just by what we talked about on the show. The last one that we did, Serial Killers, Supernatural, and Murders. Go back and watch those episodes on YouTube along with this one in case you missed it.
Well, I will say this: if you have a question and you don't want it beside your name, I would never tell. You can message me, personal message me, and I will put it up, and nobody will ever know where it came from. And I would never say anything if it's something like that. And you need to know, that's fine. So
we will do an episode about victims, being a victim, how to avoid it, and how to keep yourself safe. There will be an episode about that. I don't know when I'll do that one. It'll probably be soon. It's very important, and get you guys involved and get people on that. Unfortunately, if they want to, some people don't want people to know, but victimology. Hopefully I could get Leon, because she openly talked about what happened to her. I'd love to have her back on today, take another look at it, just to help people out there again. Like, the last show we did, we helped somebody in Little Rock, Arkansas, avoid a situation. So we want to make sure.
That felt really good to be able to get in. Yeah, we'll have to talk to Lee and make sure she's good with it. Make sure she can talk about it. It's a big thing.
And anybody out there that had a situation that is open to it, message Gwen or myself. We'd love to get you on when we do that episode, which will be probably pretty soon, probably in the next couple of weeks or whatever. So
even if you don't want your name to it, we can do it anonymously. We'll figure it out if you want to just try to share it with that. And I'm gonna say something that it's got nothing to do with this, and I hope Tom will bear with me. But we had we went to a military funeral yesterday for a friend that had issues, and a little upset about it still. But if you need to talk to somebody, call us. If we can't do it, we'll find somebody.
And we do, Gwen. And we've talked earlier and all that. We're always there for our family. We know how rough it is, especially when somebody goes through that type of trauma and decides that they don't want to be with us anymore and all that. That's the sad part, is the people that they leave behind. I think their pain has gone away, and that's what we got to remember. We don't want it that way, but their pain is gone, whatever they were going through. But anybody out there that's going through that, remember, like I talked about, our healing group, Wardruna, will get you in touch with the right counselors, or we could talk to you ourselves. But we always want to make sure that we get you proper help, and we do have that ability to be able to do that for you. Any situation that you're in, make sure you reach out to us. Again, I always like to say, I had a captain that used to tell me that, as long as nobody died or escaped, everything could be fixed. So we want to be there for you, help your healing, help your trauma. There's always a solution. There's always a solution. It's a matter of finding that path and letting that person with the candle in the darkness light your way. And we're there for you, just to sit with you and just be quiet and listen to you. That's what we're here for. That's
right. And Marla's got it right there. She's got it.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah. Just call. Just call. Well, guys, we are going to get off here. I'm going to let Thomas put it out there, close it out. But I am going to do my best to, I think, Saturday. How many episodes is this now? 4?
Yeah, it's 4. So
it is.
Yeah.
Saturday, I am going to. Yeah, I'm going to do my best, if it's good with Thomas, to just kind of pre-play it. We won't be online with it, but you can go back and watch it, catch up. I think if that's okay with him, I think I'll set it up for that, and I think it will be good. That way, if you missed something or you want to rehear something, I think it'll be good. And if you have questions, message Thomas, message me as soon as we can get to it.
Yeah.
That's right, Blaine. You are. Blaine's ex-military. I hope I said that right. Blaine retired. Hope he'll listen to you. All of us will. I promise. So.
Yeah, we've all been through stuff. We've all been
yeah.
through stuff, and we're always there for each other. And
Exactly.
you know, there's always somebody out there that'll listen. So just remember that.
Exactly. But Saturday, I'm going to replay all Thomas's episode on Profiled. So, and we will be putting out the new ad as soon as Thomas gets it ready, and we get it situated. And next, we have Lynn Dorman coming up at 9:30, and of course, you know, we have shows most during the week.
Watch all the shows. All the shows are great in their own way, and keep them going. And again, make sure you subscribe to All Access Network Television on YouTube. Yes. That always helps. Send your stars. Keep them going. There's my friend Sammy. I love her. We're going to see her very soon. Her and her husband James. I know he was filming some movies recently, so I haven't talked to them in a little bit. But we're all going to get together soon in New Orleans, and we're gonna light up the town, paint it red, and have some fun. A lot of good food and great company with that event coming up.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, Thomas, close us out.
All right, we're closing it out. I will see you guys next week. And like I always say at the end of all my videos, even though I'm doing Profiled, of course, when we get all information, we really go down, and we're going down tonight, ending it because we're going down the rabbit hole again. We'll see you guys next week.